The Galactic Rehabilitation Center for Displaced Beings stretched across 3 city blocks on Nexus Prime, its chrome walls reflecting the twin suns that never seemed to warm the cold metal structure. Inside, thousands of creatures from hundreds of worlds waited behind energy barriers, hoping someone would choose them for adoption or guardianship. Most had been there for cycles, some for decades. Zephyr curled in the corner of his containment cell, his once magnificent scales now dull and gray. The young dragon measured barely 12 feet from snout to tail tip, small for his species but still too large for most potential guardians. His wings, which should have shimmered with iridescent blues and purples, hung limp against his sides like tattered curtains. The other inmates had long since stopped trying to console him. Dragons were supposed to be proud, fierce creatures that commanded respect across the galaxy. But Zephyr had been here since he was a hatchling, abandoned after his homeworld was destroyed in the Xerion War. He had never learned to fly properly, never breathed his first ceremonial fire, never heard the ancient songs of his people. He was, by all accounts, the most pathetic dragon anyone had ever seen. "Another viewing day," announced the automated system, its cheerful tone grating against the reality of the situation. Potential guardians would walk through the facility, pointing at the more exotic or useful creatures. The Twi'lek children always went first with their natural empathic abilities. The mechanical beings found homes quickly due to their technical skills. Even the blob-like Gorthak had their charm. Dragons, however, were considered too dangerous, too proud, too difficult to manage. And Zephyr, with his obvious depression and lack of traditional dragon traits, was the least appealing of them all. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn jacket as he entered the facility, his military boots echoing against the polished floor. The human looked nothing like the typical wealthy adopters who frequented this place. His clothes had seen better days, his dark hair needed cutting, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. The intake coordinator, a blue-skinned Alturian, looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Sir, I should inform you that our premium specimens require substantial resources for proper care," the coordinator said, clearly trying to steer Marcus toward the cheaper options. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not looking for premium anything. Just show me who needs a home." They walked past the popular sections where families cooed over small, manageable creatures. Marcus barely glanced at them. He had fought in 3 galactic conflicts, seen the worst the universe had to offer, and lost more friends than he cared to count. He wasn't here for something cute or easy. "Perhaps one of our service droids would suit your needs," the coordinator suggested as they approached the mechanical section. "No thanks. Keep going." They continued deeper into the facility, past the creatures that required special atmospheric conditions, past those deemed too aggressive for civilian adoption. Finally, they reached the isolation wing where the long-term residents lived. This was where hope came to die. "These beings have various complications," the coordinator explained. "Most have been here for extended periods and may not integrate well into domestic situations." Marcus stopped walking when he saw the dragon. Zephyr didn't even look up when footsteps approached his cell. He had learned not to hope anymore. Humans especially tended to be afraid of dragons despite their current pathetic state. But something made him glance up. Maybe the fact that these footsteps had stopped outside his enclosure and stayed there. The human staring at him was different from the others. Where most people looked at him with fear, disgust, or pity, this one's dark eyes held something else entirely. "Recognition, maybe. Understanding. What's his story?" Marcus asked quietly. The coordinator sighed. "Zephyr, last survivor of Dracosia Prime. Been here 8 years. Well, frankly, he's broken. Doesn't eat properly, won't socialize, shows no interest in typical dragon activities. Several potential guardians have inquired over the years, but dragons require specialized care that most beings simply cannot provide." Marcus watched as the dragon slowly raised his head. Even in his diminished state, Zephyr was beautiful. His scales might be dulled, but Marcus could see hints of the colors they once held. His eyes, a deep golden amber, held intelligence and pain in equal measure. "Has anyone actually tried to help him? Or have you all just warehoused him here for 8 years? The coordinator bristled. "I'll have you know this facility provides excellent care. I mean, really help him. Work with him. Spend time with him." Marcus stepped closer to the energy barrier. "You're telling me that in 8 years nobody thought maybe this kid just needed someone to give a damn about him?" Zephyr's eyes widened slightly. No one had ever called him kid before. No one had ever suggested his problems might be fixable. Sir, dragons are not pets. They're highly intelligent beings with complex needs. The resources required, how much? Marcus interrupted. I beg your pardon? How much to adopt him? What's the process? The coordinator fumbled with his tablet. Well, there's the adoption fee, plus required habitat modifications, dietary requirements, medical examinations, behavioral assessments. I'm afraid the total would be quite substantial. Perhaps 30,000 galactic credits to start. Then ongoing costs. I'll take him. Both the coordinator and Zephyr stared at Marcus in shock. Sir, I don't think you understand the magnitude. I understand perfectly. Marcus pulled out a credit chip. I also understand that this kid has been rotting in a cage for 8 years because everyone's decided he's too much trouble. Well, I've got news for you. I've seen broken things heal before. I've seen hopeless situations turn around, and I've got a feeling that what this dragon needs isn't money or fancy equipment. He needs someone who won't give up on him. Zephyr pressed himself against the energy barrier, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. This strange, scarred human wanted to take him home. After all this time, someone actually wanted him. There are forms to fill out, assessments to complete. The coordinator began. Then let's get started, Marcus said firmly. He looked directly at Zephyr. What do you say, buddy? Want to get out of here? For the first time in 8 years, Zephyr felt something stir in his chest. It was small and fragile, but it was definitely there. Hope. The paperwork took 6 hours. Marcus sat patiently through every form, every warning, every legal disclaimer the facility threw at him. The coordinator seemed convinced that if he made the process difficult enough, this crazy human would change his mind and walk away like all the others. He was wrong. Zephyr watched from his cell as Marcus methodically worked through each document. The dragon had witnessed this process before with other inmates, seen the moment when potential guardians realized the true scope of what they were undertaking and quietly backed away. But Marcus never wavered. When the coordinator mentioned the liability insurance required for dragon guardianship, Marcus signed. When they explained the specialized dietary needs, Marcus nodded and added supplements to his shopping list. When they warned him about potential property damage, Marcus simply asked for contractor recommendations. I have to ask, the coordinator said during a brief break, what makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? Zephyr has been evaluated by xenopsychologists, dragon specialists, and behavioral experts. They all reached the same conclusion. Marcus looked up from the forms, which was that he suffered too much trauma to ever function normally. His spirit is broken beyond repair. You know what your problem is? Marcus said, setting down his stylus. You're thinking like bureaucrats instead of living beings. You see a broken dragon and you file him under irreparable. I see a kid who's been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to care about him. And I think maybe what he needs is someone who won't give up when things get tough. The coordinator's blue skin darkened with irritation. Sir, with respect, sentiment won't solve Zephyr's psychological issues. He hasn't spoken in 3 years. He barely eats. He shows no interest in flight training or fire-breathing exercises. These are fundamental dragon behaviors. Maybe he'll never breathe fire. Maybe he'll never be a typical dragon, so what? Did anyone ever ask him what he wanted to be instead of telling him what he should be? Through the observation window, Zephyr's golden eyes widened. No one had ever suggested that he might be allowed to choose his own path. Dragons were expected to be mighty warriors, wise counselors, or fearsome guardians. The idea that he could be something else entirely was revolutionary. Finally, the last form was signed and the energy barrier around Zephyr's cell deactivated. The dragon remained curled in his corner, uncertain how to respond to this moment he had dreamed about for so long. Marcus entered the cell slowly, keeping his hands visible and his movements non-threatening. He had learned patience during his military service, especially when dealing with traumatized civilians. Hey there, Zephyr. I know this is probably scary. No rush, okay? We'll go at your pace. Zephyr's voice, when he finally used it, was barely a whisper. Why? It was the first word he had spoken in years, and it carried the weight of every abandonment, every disappointment, every day of believing himself worthless. Marcus settled onto the floor, making himself smaller and less intimidating. Because everyone deserves a chance to be happy. Because 8 years in a cage is 8 years too many. Because when I look at you, I don't see a broken dragon. I see someone who survived things that would have destroyed lesser beings. I'm not strong, Zephyr said, his voice gaining a little more substance.
I can't fly properly.
I've never breathed fire. The other dragons were right to leave me behind. The other dragons were idiots, Marcus said bluntly. Strength isn't just about breathing fire or flying fast. You've survived 8 years of loneliness and rejection, and you're still here. You're still trying. That takes more courage than most beings have. Zephyr slowly uncurled himself, revealing the full extent of his diminished form. Where dragons his age should have been powerful and proud, he was thin and hesitant. His wings trembled with the effort of extending them. I don't know how to be anyone's companion, Zephyr admitted. I don't know how to live outside these walls. Good thing you won't be figuring it out alone then, Marcus said with a gentle smile. I've got a place outside the city. Lots of space, no crowds, no pressure. You can take all the time you need to figure out who you want to be. They left the facility together as the twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the landing platform, where Marcus's beat-up transport waited. It wasn't much to look at. A converted military cargo hauler with mismatched hull plates and engine modifications that probably violated several safety codes. But to Zephyr, it looked like freedom. The coordinator watched them go with a mixture of disbelief and concern. In his experience, these idealistic adoptions always ended badly. He gave it a month before the human returned, asking to surrender the dragon back to the facility. During the flight to Marcus's property, Zephyr pressed his face to the small porthole, watching the cityscape give way to open countryside. He had forgotten what horizons looked like, how the sky could stretch endlessly without walls to contain it. You okay back there? Marcus called from the pilot's seat. It's so big, Zephyr whispered. Everything is so big. You'll get used to it. Actually, you might find you like having room to stretch your wings. I told you I can't fly. Can't or won't. There's a difference, Zephyr considered this. He had attempted flight training at the facility years ago, but the instructors had quickly given up when he couldn't master even basic hovering. The shame of those failures had convinced him that flight was simply beyond his capabilities. Marcus's property turned out to be a modest house, surrounded by rolling hills and ancient trees. It was simple but comfortable, with large windows that let in natural light and rooms sized for a human rather than the institutional vastness of the facility. Your room is through here, Marcus said, leading Zephyr to what had once been a cargo bay. He had converted it into a spacious living area with soft lighting and a raised sleeping platform covered in thick blankets. I figured you might want your own space while you adjust. Zephyr explored the room cautiously, hardly believing it was real. After 8 years of sterile metal walls, the warm wood and soft fabrics felt almost too good to be true. Marcus, he said suddenly, what if I disappoint you? What if I can't become what you hope I'll become? Marcus turned from where he was adjusting the temperature controls. Zephyr, listen to me carefully. I don't need you to become anything specific. I just need you to become yourself. Whatever that looks like, whoever that is, it's enough. You're enough. For the second time that day, Zephyr felt hope stir in his chest. This time it was stronger. The first week was harder than either of them had expected. Zephyr spent most of his time huddled in his room, emerging only for meals that he barely touched. The freedom he had dreamed about for so long felt overwhelming and terrifying. Outside, the world stretched endlessly in all directions with no barriers to contain him, no schedules to follow, no guards to tell him what to do. The uncertainty was paralyzing. Marcus watched patiently, offering food and gentle conversation without pushing for more. He had seen this before in soldiers returning from captivity, the difficulty of adjusting to freedom after prolonged confinement. Trust would take time. On the 8th day, Marcus found Zephyr standing by the large window in the main room, staring out at the morning sky with an expression of intense longing. Penny for your thoughts? Marcus asked, settling into his reading chair with a cup of coffee. I was thinking about flying, Zephyr said quietly. I used to dream about it in the facility. Not the clumsy attempts I made during training, but real flying, soaring through clouds, feeling the wind beneath my wings. He paused, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Do you think dreams can come true if you're broken? Marcus set down his cup. Kid, dreams don't care if you're broken. Some of the most beautiful things in the universe were once in pieces. The instructors said I lacked the proper instincts. My takeoff technique was wrong. My wing positioning was incorrect, my landing approach was dangerous. Zephyr's voice grew smaller with each remembered criticism. They said some dragons just aren't meant to fly. Well, those instructors were idiots, Marcus said matter-of-factly. You want to know what I think? I think they tried to teach you to fly like every other dragon instead of teaching you to fly like Zephyr. The dragon turned from the window, confusion clear in his golden eyes. What do you mean? Marcus stood and joined him at the window. Look, I'm not a dragon, but I've learned a few things about flight during my military service. Every species, every individual has their own style. Some are built for power, some for grace, some for endurance. Maybe your style just doesn't match what they expected. But the training manuals were written by other dragons who flew in their own way. Doesn't mean it's the only way. Marcus pointed to a bird outside, a small creature with iridescent feathers that was hovering near the window feeder. That little guy doesn't fly like an eagle, and an eagle doesn't fly like a shuttle, and a shuttle doesn't fly like a starfighter. But they all get where they're going. Zephyr watched the small bird dart and dance through the air with impossible precision. It was nothing like the powerful, majestic flight described in dragon legends, but it was undeniably beautiful. Would you help me try again? Zephyr asked so quietly Marcus almost missed it. Absolutely. But we're going to do it your way this time. No manuals, no proper techniques, no expectations. Just you, your wings, and all the time in the world to figure it out. They started that afternoon in the largest field on Marcus's property. Zephyr extended his wings fully for the first time in years, and despite their apparent frailty, Marcus could see they were actually quite functional. Different from the broad, powerful wings shown in dragon artwork, but sleek and elegant in their own way. Don't think about what you're supposed to do, Marcus coached from a safe distance. Just feel what your body wants to do. Zephyr closed his eyes and let instinct take over. Instead of the violent downward thrusts he had been taught, his wings moved in a more flowing pattern, almost like swimming through air. On his third attempt, he managed to lift himself a few feet off the ground for several seconds before settling back down gently. Did you see that? Zephyr's excitement was infectious. I actually left the ground. I saw it. That was amazing. How did it feel? Different than I expected, lighter, more natural. Zephyr flexed his wings experimentally. The instructors always said I needed to be more forceful, more aggressive. But that felt wrong. This felt right. Over the following days, their training sessions became the highlight of both their routines. Marcus would set up his chair in the field and work on his tablet while Zephyr practiced. They discovered that the dragon's flying style was indeed unique, more dance than dominance, emphasizing precision and control over raw power. You're a precision flyer, Marcus observed after watching Zephyr navigate between two closely spaced trees without disturbing a single leaf. In military terms, you'd be perfect for reconnaissance or rescue operations. Not every dragon needs to be a heavy assault unit. The compliment meant more to Zephyr than Marcus could have known. For the first time in his life, someone was telling him that his natural abilities were valuable, rather than deficient. But it wasn't just flight training that was helping Zephyr heal. The simple routine of daily life, cooking meals together, maintaining the property, evening conversations by the fireplace, was teaching him that he could be valued for more than just traditional dragon abilities. Marcus had a way of making even mundane tasks feel meaningful. When Zephyr helped repair a section of fence, Marcus praised his precision and attention to detail. When the dragon's natural empathy helped calm an injured wild animal they found, Marcus pointed out that this was a rare gift. Slowly, Zephyr began to see himself as someone with unique strengths rather than universal weaknesses. Marcus, Zephyr said one evening as they sat watching the sunset, why did you really adopt me? And don't say it was just because I needed help. You could have chosen any of the creatures at that facility. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the horizon. Because I recognized something in your eyes. The look of someone who had been written off as a lost cause. I've been there myself. You? After my last deployment, I spent 2 years in a medical facility dealing with trauma and injuries that the doctor said would never fully heal. Everyone was very kind and professional, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was done, finished. A broken soldier who would never be useful again. Zephyr studied his guardian's scarred face with new understanding. What changed? I stopped trying to be the soldier I used to be and started figuring out who I could become instead. Turns out there was more to me than I had realized. I thought maybe the same might be true for you. And if I never become a proper dragon? Marcus smiled. Then you'll become an improper dragon, and that'll be even better. The universe has enough proper dragons. It needs more Zephyrs. That night Zephyr dreamed of flying again. But this time he wasn't trying to match some impossible standard of draconic perfection. He was simply himself, moving through the sky with grace and purpose, finally free to soar in his own unique way. 3 months into their partnership, Zephyr had progressed from tentative hovering to confident aerial maneuvers around the property. His scales had begun to regain their luster, showing hints of the deep blues and purples that had been hidden beneath years of depression and neglect. More importantly, he had started to smile. Marcus was in his workshop that morning repairing a broken irrigation pump when urgent beeping from his communication array interrupted his work. The message that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. Emergency evacuation notice. Seismic activity detected in Sector 7. All residents must evacuate immediately. Predicted magnitude 8.5 quake in approximately 4 hours. Sector 7 included the Riverside community, a settlement of elderly beings who had chosen to retire on this peaceful world. Many of them had limited mobility and would need assistance evacuating before the earthquake hit. Marcus ran outside to find Zephyr practicing aerial turns between the tall oak trees. "Zephyr, we have a problem." The dragon landed gracefully, concern immediate in his golden eyes. "What's wrong?" Marcus quickly explained the situation. "The emergency services are overwhelmed. They're prioritizing the larger population centers first. Riverside might not get help in time." "How many people live there?" "About 200. Most of them are elderly or disabled. The access roads are narrow and winding. It'll take hours to evacuate them by ground transport, assuming the roads don't collapse first." Zephyr's mind raced. "What about air transport?" "The emergency shuttles are busy with the main city evacuation. By the time they get to Riverside," Marcus shook his head grimly, "those people are going to die unless someone helps them." Without hesitation, Zephyr spread his wings. "Then we help them." "Zephyr, no. It's too dangerous. You've only been flying for 3 months, and carrying passengers is completely different from solo flight. If something goes wrong, then people die because I was too scared to try." The dragon's voice carried a conviction that Marcus had never heard before. "You taught me that I don't have to be a typical dragon to be valuable. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to be valuable for." Marcus looked at his companion, no longer the broken, hopeless creature from the shelter, but a being discovering his own courage and purpose. "It's a 40-minute flight each way. That's only time for maybe 6 trips before the quake hits. We can't save everyone." "Then we save who we can." Zephyr's scales were beginning to shimmer with determination. "But I can't do it alone. I need you to come with me, to help coordinate the evacuations and keep people calm." "Zephyr, I'm too heavy. You've never carried a passenger, let alone someone my size. We'll figure it out. We have to." 20 minutes later, they were airborne and heading toward Riverside. Marcus clung to the makeshift harness they had rigged, trying not to think about the ground rushing beneath them. Zephyr's flight style, which had seemed so graceful during practice, now revealed its true strength. His precise control and smooth movements made the ride surprisingly stable, even with the added weight. "There," Marcus pointed ahead to where Riverside nestled in a valley beside a winding river. Smoke was already rising from several buildings where minor tremors had damaged power systems. They landed in the community center courtyard, where confused residents were gathering. Many were in hover chairs or using mobility aids. Some were clearly disoriented by the emergency alerts, and all were frightened. "Who's in charge here?" Marcus called out as he unstrapped himself from Zephyr's back. An elderly Centauri woman rolled forward in her hover chair. "I'm Administrator Kelsa. Are you from the emergency services? Where are the evacuation shuttles?" "The shuttles are busy elsewhere," Marcus explained quickly. "We're here to help, but we can only take a few people at a time." "Who needs to go first?" "The medical facility," Kelsa said immediately. "Building 7. There are 12 patients who can't be moved without assistance." Zephyr was already studying the layout of the settlement. "Marcus, what if we don't try to evacuate everyone? What if we move them to safety within the valley?" "What do you mean?" The dragon pointed with one wing toward an area of high ground near the river. "That ridge is solid bedrock. Even a major quake won't bring it down. If we can get everyone up there with emergency supplies, they'll be safe until proper rescue arrives." Marcus looked where Zephyr was pointing. then back at the settlement. That's actually brilliant. We can make multiple quick trips instead of trying to fly people out of the valley entirely. They spent the next hour in a frantic but organized evacuation effort. Zephyr's precision flying proved invaluable. He could land in tight spaces, hover steadily while patients were loaded, and navigate between buildings with minimal room for error. His gentle nature helped keep frightened residents calm, while Marcus coordinated the logistics and medical priorities. I never thought I'd be rescued by a dragon, wheezed an elderly human as Zephyr carefully set him down on the ridge, especially such a polite one. He's special, Marcus agreed, watching Zephyr immediately take off again for another group of evacuees. By the time the first major tremor hit, they had moved 180 of the 200 residents to safety. The remaining 20 were emergency personnel who refused to leave until the last possible moment. One more trip, Zephyr panted as they loaded the final group. His scales were dulled with exhaustion, and his wing beats were becoming labored. "Are you sure you can make it?" Marcus asked, concerned by how tired his companion looked. "I have to." They were halfway to the ridge when the earthquake struck in earnest. The valley floor buckled and twisted, buildings collapsing like toys, but Zephyr held steady, his precise control keeping them level even as the ground heaved beneath them. They landed on the ridge just as a massive fissure opened where the community center had been. The evacuees cheered as the emergency personnel stumbled off Zephyr's back, the last residents of Riverside to escape the destruction. "You did it," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe and pride. "You saved them all." Zephyr collapsed to the ground, utterly spent but with his golden eyes shining brighter than Marcus had ever seen them. "We did it. We saved them." Administrator Kelsa approached them, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't come, just take care of each other," Zephyr said softly. "That's thanks enough." As they waited for proper rescue services to arrive, Marcus watched Zephyr interacting with the evacuees. The dragon had found something during this crisis that all the flight training in the world couldn't have given him. A sense of purpose. A knowledge that he was exactly who he was supposed to be. The broken dragon from the shelter was gone forever. In his place was a hero who had discovered that strength came in many forms. And sometimes the most important battles were won not with fire and fury, but with precision, compassion, and the courage to help others when they needed it most. News of the Riverside rescue spread across the galaxy faster than Marcus and Zephyr could have imagined. Within days, their quiet homestead was besieged by reporters, government officials, and representatives from various organizations. The footage of Zephyr gently carrying elderly evacuees to safety had captured hearts across dozens of worlds. "Dragon Hero saves hundreds," read one headline. "The precision pilot of Nexus Prime," proclaimed another. But it was the editorial in the Galactic Tribune that really caught their attention. Sometimes the broken find their purpose not despite their differences, but because of them. Marcus found Zephyr hiding in his room, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. The dragon who had faced down a natural disaster without hesitation was trembling at the thought of facing cameras and crowds. "They want me to be something I'm not again," Zephyr said quietly. "A hero dragon, a symbol. They're talking about parades and medals and public appearances." "What do you want to be?" Marcus asked, settling onto the floor beside his friend. "I want to help people, that's all, but quietly. Without all this spectacle," Marcus nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. "You know, there's a way we could do that. Help people, I mean, without the circus." Zephyr looked up hopefully. "How?" "The Galactic Emergency Response Network has been trying to reach us. They're not interested in publicity. They want to know if we'd consider joining their rapid response team. Disaster relief, search and rescue, medical evacuations, the kind of work where being able to fly precisely in dangerous conditions is more valuable than breathing fire." "You mean, make it official?" "If you want to. No pressure. We could also just go back to our quiet life and let the attention die down." Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, considering. The people at Riverside, when they looked at me, they didn't see a failed dragon. They saw someone who helped them when they needed it most. I liked that feeling. "Then let's go meet with the Gurn representatives. But we do it on our terms, okay? No publicity, no hero worship. Just honest work helping people." The meeting took place the following week at a discreet location off-world. Commander Sarah Voss, a no-nonsense human who ran Gurn's Rapid Response Division, got straight to the point. "We've analyzed the Riverside footage extensively. she said, pulling up holographic displays. Your flight precision is extraordinary. Mr. Zephyr. The ability to maintain stability while carrying passengers in seismic conditions is something our current pilots can't match. I'm not trained for military operations, Zephyr said nervously. We're not military. We're civilian emergency response. Natural disasters, medical emergencies, search and rescue operations on worlds where conventional aircraft can't operate safely. Commander Voss gestured to images of past missions. What we need is exactly what you demonstrated at Riverside. Precision, calm under pressure, and the ability to access difficult locations. Marcus leaned forward. What would this involve exactly? Training first. 6 months of intensive instruction in emergency medicine, search and rescue techniques, and disaster response protocols. Then assignment to a rapid response team. You'd be on call for major emergencies throughout this sector. Both of us? Zephyr asked. Absolutely. The partnership you've developed is part of what makes you effective. Mr. Chen's military experience and your flying abilities complement each other perfectly. They toured the Gurn training facility, met other rescue teams, and learned about the organization's mission. It was everything Marcus had hoped for. Purposeful work that utilized Zephyr's unique abilities without exploiting them for entertainment. There's one more thing, Commander Voss said as they prepared to leave. We'd want you to consider training other non-traditional flyers. We've had several beings come forward after seeing the Riverside footage, creatures who were told they'd never fly but want to try again. Your training methods seem to be unconventional but effective. Zephyr's eyes lit up. You mean teach others like me? Others who've been overlooked or dismissed? We think there might be a lot of potential pilots out there who just need someone to believe in them. The decision was easy. 3 weeks later, Marcus and Zephyr reported to the Gurn Training Center to begin their new careers. Training was intense but rewarding. Zephyr excelled at the technical aspects of emergency flight, learning to navigate by instruments, calculate weight distributions for rescue loads, and operate in hazardous conditions. Marcus focused on emergency medicine and disaster coordination, building on his military experience. But it was in the teaching sessions that Zephyr truly found his calling. Their first student was Arya, a young Avialan whose natural flying ability had been damaged in an accident. Like Zephyr, she had been told she would never fly again. Don't think about what you've lost, Zephyr coached gently as Arya struggled with basic maneuvers. Think about what you still have. Your wings may be different now, but different doesn't mean broken. Watching Arya achieve her first stable hover 3 weeks later, her face radiant with joy and accomplishment, Marcus realized that Zephyr had found something even more valuable than his own healing, the ability to help others heal. Their first official mission came 2 months into training. A research station on a remote world had lost contact during a violent storm. Conventional rescue craft couldn't penetrate the electromagnetic disturbance, but Zephyr's precise control and natural feel for air currents allowed him to navigate the chaotic weather patterns. They found the station damaged but intact, its crew of 6 scientists trapped in a shelter by debris. While Marcus coordinated the rescue and provided medical aid to the injured, Zephyr carefully extracted each person from the wreckage and flew them to safety through the howling storm. I've never seen flying like that, the station commander gasped as they reached the evacuation zone. How did you navigate through those wind shears? I listened to what the air was telling me, Zephyr replied simply. Every storm has patterns if you know how to feel them. It was the first of many missions. Over the following months, they rescued miners trapped in collapsed tunnels, evacuated refugees from war zones, and delivered medical supplies to planets cut off by natural disasters. Each mission reinforced the same truth. Zephyr's unique flying style, once seen as a weakness, was actually his greatest strength. But it was during their downtime, training new students at the Gurn facility, that Marcus saw Zephyr truly come into his own. The shy, broken dragon from the shelter had become a patient, encouraging instructor who specialized in working with beings who had been told they would never fly. You remind me of someone I used to know, Marcus said one evening as they watched their latest class of students practicing in the training dome. Who? A dragon I met in a shelter once. Saddest creature I'd ever seen. Could barely lift his head, let alone his wings. Zephyr smiled, understanding the gentle teasing. What happened to him? He learned that being different isn't the same as being broken. He learned that the galaxy doesn't need another typical dragon. It needs more beings brave enough to be exactly who they are, even when the world tells them they're not enough. Looking out at their students, a mix of species and backgrounds, all finding their own unique ways to soar, Zephyr realized that his journey had come full circle. He had found not just his own wings, but had learned to help others find theirs too. 2 years after joining Gurn, Marcus and Zephyr had become one of the most respected rescue teams in the organization. Their success rate was unmatched. Their training program had graduated over 100 previously unflightable beings, and their quiet professionalism had earned them respect. Throughout the emergency response community, then came the mission that would test everything they had learned. The emergency call arrived at 300 Standard Time. A catastrophic failure aboard the passenger liner Celestial Dawn had left the ship stranded in the gravity well of a gas giant with over 3,000 beings aboard. The ship's engines were failing, its hull was compromised, and it was slowly being pulled into the planet's crushing atmosphere. All conventional rescue craft are too large to dock with the damaged ship, Commander Voss explained during the emergency briefing. The docking ports are twisted, the airlocks are misaligned. We need someone who can navigate the debris field around the ship and evacuate passengers through the emergency hatches. Marcus studied the technical readouts with growing concern. The atmospheric interference around that gas giant will make navigation extremely difficult. And the time pressure, we have maybe 6 hours before the ship enters the crush zone, Voss continued. After that, no one comes out alive. Zephyr had been quiet during the briefing, but now he spoke up. How many other rescue teams are responding? Every available unit, but most of them will be relegated to ferry duty, moving people from the Celestial Dawn to the main rescue ships. The actual evacuation? That's going to fall primarily to units that can operate in confined spaces with precise control. Units like us, Marcus said grimly. You're our best hope for getting into those damaged sections of the ship, but I won't order you to take this mission. The risk level is extreme. Marcus looked at Zephyr, seeing his own thoughts reflected in the dragon's golden eyes. 3,000 lives. Beings with families, dreams, futures hanging in the balance. We'll do it, Zephyr said simply. But we're going to need our best students as backup. Arya, Kex, and Torres, they're ready for something like this. Are you sure? They only graduated last month. They're ready, Marcus confirmed. And we'll need all the help we can get. 4 hours later, their small fleet approached the disaster site. The Celestial Dawn hung like a broken toy against the swirling orange backdrop of the gas giant, its hull cracked in leaking atmosphere. Debris from the initial explosion formed a dangerous obstacle course around the ship, while electromagnetic interference from the planet made sensor navigation unreliable. Remember, Marcus radioed to their student pilots, we can't save everyone if we don't save ourselves first. Fly smart, not heroic. Zephyr led them through the debris field with the same precise control he had developed over 2 years of training and missions. Behind him, Arya's modified flying style allowed her to slip through gaps that would have been impossible for conventional aircraft. Kex, a formerly flightless insectoid, used his compound eyes to track multiple debris pieces simultaneously. Torres, a Raptorian whose wings had been damaged in combat, had learned to fly with mechanical precision despite his limitations. It's beautiful, Arya whispered over the comm, and Marcus knew she wasn't talking about the destruction. She was watching her instructor navigate impossible conditions with the same grace he showed during training flights. The evacuation began immediately. The ship's emergency crews had organized passengers into groups at the functioning escape hatches, but the damaged airlocks meant each person had to be extracted individually and carried to the waiting rescue ships. Zephyr took the most dangerous, sectioned the forward compartments, where hull breaches made the atmosphere unstable and debris fields shifted constantly. His students handled the more accessible areas, but even those required flying skills that would have been considered impossible just a few years earlier. Zephyr, Marcus called during their 15th trip. We've got a problem. The ship's structural integrity is failing faster than predicted. We've got maybe 90 minutes before total collapse. How many people left? 800. Mostly in the lower sections where the damage is worst. Zephyr was quiet for a moment, calculating. At their current pace, they might save half of them. What if we change tactics? Instead of ferrying people to the rescue ships, what if we move them to stable sections of the ship? I don't follow. The aft section is still structurally sound. If we concentrate everyone there, the main rescue ships can dock properly once we've cleared the debris field. It was a risky plan, consolidating evacuees in one area while the ship continued to deteriorate. But it was their only hope of saving everyone. All units, Marcus broadcast, new plan. We're moving everyone to sections 12 through 15. Priority is speed and volume, not distance. The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. Zephyr's team worked with desperate efficiency, moving small groups of passengers through the increasingly unstable ship. The Dragon's precision flying allowed him to navigate corridors that were barely wider than his wingspan, while his students proved that their unconventional training had prepared them for situations no standard flight school could have imagined. Last group, Arya reported, her voice tight with exhaustion. 20 beings in Section 3, but there's a problem. The corridor is blocked by debris. Can you get through? Marcus asked. Not me, but maybe. She looked toward Zephyr, who was just completing another run. Zephyr studied the situation through the ship's internal cameras. The corridor was indeed blocked, but there was a narrow gap near the ceiling that might accommodate a very precise approach. I can do it, he said quietly, but it's going to be tight. The approach required everything Zephyr had learned about flying in confined spaces. The corridor was barely wide enough for his wings, and one miscalculation would send him crashing into the walls. But as he slipped through the gap and emerged into the trapped section, he found 20 terrified passengers who cheered when they saw him. I don't suppose any of you are small? He asked with a gentle smile. It took 3 trips to evacuate the final group, each one more dangerous as the ship continued to deteriorate. On the last run, with the final 2 passengers clinging to his back, Zephyr felt the corridor walls beginning to buckle around him. Go, 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 Marcus shouted over the comm as structural supports began failing throughout the ship. Zephyr burst from the collapsing section, just as the main rescue ships completed their docking procedures. Behind him, the forward third of the Celestial Dawn imploded into twisted metal. But ahead of him, every single passenger and crew member was safe aboard the rescue vessels. Status report. Commander Voss's voice came over the comm as they cleared the debris field. Mission accomplished, Marcus replied, watching Zephyr's exhausted but triumphant form ahead of them. All souls rescued. 0 casualties and outstanding work, all of you. The families of those 3,000 beings owe you their lives. As they flew back toward the Gurn base, Arya pulled alongside Zephyr. Sir, thank you for believing we were ready for this. Thank you for proving me right, Zephyr replied. Though I should point out, you flew that rescue better than I could have. When I first started with Gurn, we had a good teacher. Marcus listened to the exchange with a warmth that had nothing to do with the ship's heating systems. The broken dragon from the shelter had become not just a hero, but a mentor who inspired others to discover their own impossible possibilities. But more than that, Zephyr had become proof of something Marcus had always believed, that sometimes the beings the universe writes off as failures are actually exactly what the universe needs most. 5 years had passed since Marcus first walked into the Galactic Rehabilitation Center and found a broken dragon in a corner cage. Now, as he stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Gurn Training Academy, he marveled at how much the universe could change when someone refused to accept that broken things had to stay broken. Below them, Zephyr was conducting a master class for advanced students, demonstrating precision flying techniques in a complex obstacle course. His scales now gleamed with full health, shifting between deep blues and brilliant purples as he moved. But more than his physical transformation, it was the confidence in his voice that marked how far he had come. Remember, Zephyr was saying to his students, flying isn't about overpowering the air, it's about partnering with it. Feel what it's telling you and respond accordingly. Marcus smiled, remembering their early training sessions when Zephyr could barely maintain altitude for more than a few seconds. Now the dragon was considered one of the finest precision pilots in the galaxy, and his unconventional training methods had revolutionized how Gurn approached flight instruction. The academy itself was a testament to their success. What had started as a small program for unflightable beings had grown into a full institution. The success rate was remarkable. Over 90% of beings who had been dismissed by traditional flight schools were now certified rescue pilots, each flying in their own unique style. Director Chen? A young aide approached Marcus. The ceremony is about to begin. Marcus nodded and made his way to the main auditorium where today's graduation was taking place. 200 new pilots were receiving their certifications, representing dozens of species and backgrounds. Many of them had been rejected by other institutions, told they would never fly, considered too damaged or different to succeed. Zephyr was delivering the keynote address, speaking to the graduates with the same gentle authority he brought to all his teaching. "When I was young," he said, his voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium, "I was told that I was a failure as a dragon. I couldn't breathe fire, I couldn't fly the way other dragons flew. And I spent 8 years believing that meant I was worthless." In the audience, Marcus spotted several beings from the original Riverside evacuation. They came to every graduation ceremony, having formed a sort of extended family with Zephyr and his students. "But I learned something important," Zephyr continued. "The universe doesn't need more beings trying to be something they're not. It needs more beings willing to become exactly who they are meant to be. Your differences aren't flaws to be corrected. They're strengths waiting to be discovered." Marcus thought about all the missions they had flown together, all the lives they had saved, all the students they had taught. Zephyr had been right that first day when he said broken things could be beautiful. The dragon had become living proof of that truth. After the ceremony, as the new graduates celebrated with their families and instructors, Marcus found himself on the Academy's memorial wall. It honored the beings who had made the ultimate sacrifice in service to others, including several of their own graduates who had died in rescue operations. "Thinking about mortality?" Zephyr asked, settling beside his old friend. "Thinking about legacy," Marcus replied. "When I adopted you, I thought I was saving one dragon. I never imagined we'd end up changing an entire profession." "You didn't change anything," Zephyr said gently. "You just helped me find what was already there." "And what was that?" "The ability to help others find their wings." Zephyr gestured toward the celebration continuing in the courtyard. "Look at them, Marcus. Every one of those pilots was told they couldn't fly. Now they're going out into the galaxy to save lives." Marcus nodded, then smiled. "You know what the irony is? The facility where I found you is still operating on the same philosophy, categorizing beings as suitable or unsuitable, fixable or broken. Actually," Zephyr said with a mysterious expression, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." "Oh?" "Commander Voss has approved a new initiative. We're going to start visiting facilities like the one where we met, evaluating beings who've been written off as unadoptable. Not for adoption, for training." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You want to recruit directly from the shelters?" "I want to give hope to beings who think they don't have any, the same way someone once gave hope to me." The idea was both ambitious and perfect. Marcus could already envision the program. Specialized teams visiting rehabilitation centers across the galaxy, identifying beings with potential that others had missed, offering them not just homes but purposes. "It'll be controversial," Marcus warned. "A lot of established institutions won't appreciate us suggesting their rejects could become elite rescue pilots." "Let them complain," Zephyr said with a confidence that would have been unimaginable in the broken creature Marcus had first met. Results speak louder than opinions. 6 months later, the first class of shelter recruits graduated from the academy. The ceremony was smaller than the regular graduations, but the emotional impact was immense. Beings who had spent years believing themselves worthless were now certified for the most challenging rescue operations in the galaxy. Among them was a young dragon named Ember, who had been at the same facility where Marcus found Zephyr. Like her instructor, she had been told she was a failed dragon. Unlike traditional dragons, she couldn't breathe fire, but she could breathe a gas that neutralized toxic fumes, making her invaluable for rescue operations in chemical disasters. "Sir," she said to Zephyr after receiving her certification, "thank you for showing me that being different could be a gift instead of a curse. Thank you for proving that one rescue can save more than just one life," Zephyr replied. That evening, Marcus and Zephyr sat on their old porch, watching the sunset over the hills where Zephyr had first learned to fly. The house was the same, but their lives had expanded far beyond what either had imagined possible. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. Zephyr considered the question seriously. "I regret the years I spent believing I was broken, but I don't regret being different. If I had been a typical dragon, I never would have developed the flying style that makes me effective at rescue work. I never would have understood what it feels like to be rejected, so I couldn't help others who feel the same way. So you're saying being the saddest dragon in the shelter was actually a good thing? I'm saying that sadness taught me compassion. Rejection taught me to value acceptance. And being different taught me that the galaxy needs all kinds of heroes. Zephyr stretched his wings, which now moved with unconscious grace and power. Sometimes the beings who seem most broken are actually the ones who've learned the most about healing. Marcus nodded, thinking about the hundreds of lives they had saved, the thousands of students they had taught, the entire industry they had transformed simply by refusing to accept that some beings couldn't be helped. You know what I think? Marcus said finally. What? I think that Shelter Coordinator was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one. You really were special, just not in the way anyone expected. As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Zephyr reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair in a lonely cage to the heights of purpose and meaning, guided by someone who had seen potential where others saw only problems. The saddest dragon in the shelter had indeed found a human guardian, and the outcome had been far more extraordinary than anyone could have guessed. But perhaps that was the most human thing of all, the stubborn refusal to accept that any being was beyond hope, beyond help, beyond the possibility of becoming something wonderful. In rescuing Zephyr, Marcus had discovered a truth that now echoed throughout the galaxy. Sometimes the most beautiful flights begin with the darkest falls, and sometimes the greatest heroes are those who first learn to save themselves.